Rain hit the diner windows like tiny fists, sharp and steady, as if the night itself was trying to get inside. The roadside diner glowed dimly in the storm, a thin slice of light against the long highway. Neon letters flickered, open 24 hours. Inside, warmth and noise filled the space. Clinking cups, murmured conversations, the hum of an old jukebox trying to stay alive. Amara moved between tables with quiet grace, her shoes squeaking on the wet tiles. She had been on her feet since sunrise, working her second shift. Her apron was stained with coffee and thyme, her name tag slightly bent. Still, her eyes stayed kind. She had learned that kindness was a form of armor in places like this. Outside, the storm worsened. The bell above the door jingled as a man entered, a tall, thin figure with a soaked coat and no umbrella. His gray hair clung to his forehead, and his hands shook slightly as he removed his hat. For a moment, no one looked up. He stood by the door, dripping onto the mat, scanning for an empty seat. But every table was full. Truckers laughed loudly in the back booth. A couple argued softly near the counter, and college kids shared fries and secrets near the jukebox. The man stayed standing, awkward and invisible, his coat dark with rain. Amara noticed him first. She hesitated. Her body begged for rest. Every muscle tight, her back aching from hours of service. The only empty chair in sight was the one by the window, where she kept her notebook and half-eaten sandwich. It wasn't much, just a break she had been saving for herself. Still, she wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward him. "Sir," she said gently, "you can take my seat. It's dry and the heater's right beside it." The man blinked, startled by the offer. "Oh, I don't want to trouble you," he murmured, his voice low but clear. "It's no trouble," Amara replied with a small smile. "Storm like this, no one should be standing." He looked at her for a moment longer, really looked, and then nodded. Slowly, he made his way to the chair by the window. She pulled it out for him and placed a cup of water beside his trembling hands. Her coworkers glanced at her, puzzled. The manager, a man who believed smiles were optional and profits were not, frowned from the register. "You don't need to serve him if he hasn't ordered," he muttered under his breath. Amara ignored it. She poured coffee for the old man anyway, setting it down carefully so it wouldn't spill. The steam curled upward between them like a silent bridge. Outside, lightning flashed, white against black. Inside, time slowed. The man lifted the cup with unsteady fingers, his eyes never leaving hers. There was something searching in them, a quiet weight, as if he was measuring her soul more than her service. "Thank you," he said finally, voice almost breaking. She nodded, brushing stray hair from her face. "You're welcome, sir. Stay as long as you need." No one else paid attention. To them, it was just a soaked stranger and a tired waitress. But to Amara, something about the moment felt larger than it seemed, like a note played softly in a song only she could hear. When her break finally came, she leaned on the counter, watching the rain ease. The man sat quietly by the window, hands wrapped around the warm cup. His coat still dripped faintly, but his shoulders had relaxed. She didn't know his name or why his eyes carried that distant grief. She only knew he looked less alone now. As the neon sign buzzed outside and thunder rolled away, the camera of fate seemed to linger on one image, the man's trembling hands resting on the diner chair Amara had given up. A simple seat. An ordinary gesture, but by morning it would be the start of everything. The storm beat harder, as if the sky itself wanted to see who would break first, the walls of the diner or the people inside it. Rainwater slid down the glass in crooked lines, turning the outside world into a blur of headlights and shadows. Inside, the small diner felt like a different planet, bright, warm, and humming with the noise of tired lives. At the far end by the window, the old man sat alone. His coat was still wet, dripping quietly onto the floor. He had no umbrella, no bag, no sign of where he'd come from or where he was going, only a pair of muddy shoes and a faraway look in his eyes. Amara watched him while wiping down the counter. Every few minutes she glanced over, half worried, half curious. "The others didn't care, poor guy," whispered one customer. "Probably another wanderer looking for free coffee." Another laughed softly. "Strangers like him never tip." "You'll see." The words floated through the air, thin but sharp. Amara ignored them. She picked up the coffee pot. walked over to the man's table and poured a fresh cup without asking. The man looked up, startled. Steam rose between them, softening the lines on his face. "I didn't order this," he said quietly. "I know," Amara replied, her tone gentle but firm. "You look like you need it." He studied her face, then gave a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you." The coffee's warmth spread slowly through his hands. He sipped it carefully, as though each drop carried a memory. Around them, the noise of the diner continued, silverware clinking, people laughing. But at that table, a strange silence grew. Outside, thunder cracked. Through the glass, Amara saw umbrellas flash open like black wings as people ran to their cars. But the man had arrived without one, unprotected, exposed. The umbrella became more than an object. It was a wall between worlds, those who could shield themselves from the storm, and those who could not. Yet here, in this small corner of light, Amara's kindness had become his cover. "Do you live nearby?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. He shook his head. "Not anymore." Something in the way he said it made her pause. Not sadness, resignation. Like a man who had walked too far to remember where home once was. She wanted to ask more, but the bell at the counter rang sharply. Her manager's voice followed, dry as paper. "Amara, less chatting, more serving." She nodded, turning away. But as she moved, she noticed something. A small patch on his sleeve, frayed but neat, with tiny embroidered initials. ER. For a moment, her mind held on to the letters. They meant nothing to her, yet they felt important, like initials written on the edge of a story not yet told. The man finished his coffee slowly, eyes drifting back to the window. When she returned with the pot to refill it, he covered the cup gently with his hand. "You've done enough, miss," he said. "More than you know." When Amara walked away, she looked once more through the window. Outside, umbrellas moved like a tide of protection. Inside, the man with none sat calm and still, safe under a roof built by strangers. She didn't know his name. She only knew that sometimes kindness was the only umbrella some people ever found. Every stain on Amara's apron told a story, not of spills, but of survival. The diner clock ticked past midnight, its tired hands circling endlessly like her routine. Amara refilled coffee cups, wiped down counters, and balanced trays with quiet rhythm. Her body moved on instinct, but her mind drifted, not to rest, but to the places life had demanded she stay strong. She glanced at the chair by the window, her chair, now occupied by the old man. His coat still damp, his hands wrapped around a half-empty cup. That seat had always been her small island in a long storm, the only spot where she could sit for 5 minutes, close her eyes, and breathe. Yet tonight, giving it away hadn't hurt. It had felt right. Still, as she leaned against the counter and watched him in silence, the question tugged softly. Why do I always give what I barely have? The coffee pot hissed as she poured another round for the regulars. The sound pulled her backward in time. In memory, she was home. A tiny apartment where the wallpaper peeled like tired skin. The scent of boiled rice filled the air. Her son Malik sat by the kitchen table, pricking his finger for a blood test. He was 7 but carried the patience of someone much older. "Does it hurt, baby?" she asked. He smiled, brave and small. "A little. But I'm fine, Mama." Amara had worked 3 jobs that month to keep his insulin stocked. The rent was overdue. The landlord's voice still echoed from yesterday, a reminder that kindness didn't pay bills. Yet every morning she left Malik sleeping under a blanket patched with cartoon prints and walked into the world with a smile no one questioned. Back in the diner, she blinked away the memory and poured sugar into a cup. A truck driver cracked a joke. Laughter rippled through the room. But her thoughts stayed heavy. The bills, the medicine, the dream she had once whispered to herself in moments of exhaustion. Nursing school. She wanted to help others the way no one had helped her. But each month, that dream slipped further out of reach, hidden behind overdue notices and long shifts. Still, she never stopped believing in small acts, the kind that made life bearable. A warm smile, a hot meal, a chair offered to someone with shaking hands. When she walked past the window again, she noticed something. The old man's reflection caught in the glass beside her own. His posture was still, his eyes distant, as if weighed down by unseen years. For a moment, two worlds touched. A woman worn down by survival, and a man haunted by silence. The rain outside softened, and in the faint light, the chair between them became a symbol, not of loss, but of giving. Amara pressed a napkin under his cup to soak up the spill he hadn't noticed. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table. Coffee stains had marked the surface, just like the ones on her apron. She realized they were the same, both reminders of what remained after service, of what giving left behind. Later that night, when the diner emptied, Amara sat for a moment at another table. The old man had gone quiet again, still holding his cup as if afraid to let it go. She didn't know who he was or why he carried such silence, but she felt peace instead of pity. Perhaps kindness didn't need answers. Perhaps it was enough to simply choose it, even when life gave her every reason not to. As the neon sign flickered and the last raindrops faded from the window, Amara smiled faintly. Her chair might be taken, but her purpose was not. Sometimes the truest rest came not from sitting down, but from standing up for someone else. The laughter started small, sharp, polite, and poisonous, the kind that hides cruelty behind manners. By evening, the diner had filled again. The rain had stopped, but puddles still shone outside like broken mirrors. Inside, the warmth returned, but not kindness. The old man sat quietly by the window, coat draped over his chair, coffee growing cold. A group of wealthy patrons entered, 3 men and a woman dressed in expensive suits that smelled faintly of perfume and power. They took the booth near the old man, their laughter slicing through the soft hum of the diner. One of them, a tall man with a silver tie, noticed the old stranger and smirked. "Looks like the storm blew in more than rain," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. The woman laughed behind her hand. "Maybe he's waiting for the charity bus." Their words landed heavy in the small space like coins tossed carelessly onto a table. Some customers pretended not to hear. Others chuckled, relieved it wasn't them being mocked. Behind the counter, Amara froze. Her hand tightened around the coffee pot. She had seen mockery before. It always started as a joke and ended as cruelty. The manager, Mr. Clark, leaned toward her and spoke in a low voice. "Keep an eye on that old man. People like that make paying customers uncomfortable." "People like that?" she repeated quietly, turning her head. He sighed. "You know what I mean, Amara. We can't have the place looking like a shelter." Amara's chest tightened. She looked back at the old man, still silent, still calm, his eyes fixed on the window. Rainlight flickered across his face, softening the deep lines. He didn't react to the laughter, didn't defend himself, didn't seem to hear. But she knew he had. She took a slow breath and set the coffee pot down. "He's a customer too," she said softly. "He deserves respect like anyone else." The manager frowned. "You want to keep your job, don't you?" Her voice trembled but didn't break. "Yes, sir. That's why I'd rather lose a tip than my decency." A quiet fell over the counter. The truckers in the corner exchanged glances. The laughter from the booth dimmed for a moment. Pride interrupted by conscience. Amara picked up the old man's cup and refilled it without asking. The sound of pouring coffee echoed like a small act of rebellion. The tall man in the silver tie watched her with a thin smile. "You're wasting good coffee, sweetheart," he said. Amara didn't answer. She placed the fresh cup before the old man and slid a small receipt under the saucer. Her voice was steady now. "Your meal's on the house, sir." The old man looked up slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time all evening. His expression was unreadable, half gratitude, half sorrow. "You shouldn't have," he said. She smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But I did." Minutes later, she turned back to clear tables. The booth of wealthy customers had left without apology, their perfume still hanging in the air. The old man's corner was empty too. On the table, only the folded receipt remained, the one she had placed under his cup. She picked it up, expecting to throw it away, but it was gone. The space beneath the saucer was bare, faintly damp from the ring of coffee. A quiet mystery where paper should have been. She stood there a moment longer, watching the chair by the window, unaware that the missing receipt would soon rewrite her life. The morning light exposed what the night had taken: an empty chair, a cold cup, and a silence that felt heavier than the storm before it. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving streaks on the diner's windows like fingerprints of the night. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, familiar yet strangely hollow. Amara stood behind the counter, wiping her hands on her apron as the first wave of morning staff shuffled in. "Rough night?" one of them asked, stretching. Amara nodded absently. Her eyes had drifted toward the chair by the window. His chair. The table was still there, the cup still half full, but the old man was gone. The coat, the hat, the quiet presence that had filled the corner, vanished without a trace. She walked over slowly, scanning the table. That's when she saw it. A folded note tucked neatly beneath the saucer, held in place by the ring of dried coffee. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. 4 simple words stared back at her, written in careful, deliberate script. "Thank you for seeing me." She read it twice, then again. The message was kind, almost tender, yet something about it unsettled her. A goodbye wrapped in gratitude. The manager's voice broke through the stillness. "Amara, what's this?" She turned. Mr. Clark stood near the register, holding an empty receipt pad in one hand and his morning newspaper in the other. His face had that familiar expression, suspicion mixed with superiority. "The old man," he continued. "He didn't pay, did he?" Amara hesitated. "He left before I noticed. But he didn't seem like—" "That's not the point." The words cut sharp. "You let someone eat and walk out. We're already running losses this week, and now you're giving out charity meals?" Her throat tightened. "Sir, it wasn't charity." He needed help. He crossed his arms. "And who's helping you when this place closes because of people like him?" The other staff turned away, pretending to be busy. The air thickened with quiet judgment. Amara felt the note burning in her palm. "He wasn't like that," she said softly, almost to herself. "He thanked me." Mr. Clark exhaled sharply. "Save it. You're suspended for a week. Maybe that'll remind you that kindness doesn't pay bills." The words landed hard. For a moment, she didn't move. Her apron suddenly felt heavy, her feet rooted to the floor. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that goodness wasn't a mistake. But no one was listening. She placed the note gently into her pocket and turned toward the empty chair. The same seat she had given up, the same place that had felt sacred for one night, now treated as proof of her failure. As the door swung open for the morning rush, Amara stepped outside into the pale sunlight. The puddles had dried, but her faith in people hadn't. It felt thinner now, fragile as paper, like the note she held in her hand. She unfolded it one last time. "Thank you for seeing me." The words looked simple, but in her heart they began to sound like something deeper, as if they carried a meaning she hadn't yet learned. Truth didn't knock on Amara's door. It flickered onto her phone screen, disguised as another piece of morning news. 3 days had passed since the old man vanished from the diner. The chair by the window sat empty now, polished clean but haunted by memory. Every time Amara passed it, she felt a strange ache, part guilt, part wonder. She had replayed that night 100 times in her mind. The laughter, the humiliation, the missing receipt, none of it made sense. The manager had cut her hours. The bills had piled up, and yet, in quiet moments, she still found herself whispering the words written on that folded note. "Thank you for seeing me." That morning, the diner TV played softly above the counter, broadcasting the usual noise, politics, weather, stock market updates. She barely paid attention until a voice said the name that froze her mid-step. Billionaire philanthropist. Elias Rourke, CEO of Rourke Holdings, has recently launched a nationwide campaign to highlight the dignity of ordinary workers. His project, titled The Unseen Test, sends him to small towns disguised as a common man. Amara looked up sharply. The anchor's voice faded under the weight of her heartbeat. The screen cut to footage, shaky, handheld video from a roadside diner somewhere upstate. There he was, the same soaked coat, the same trembling hands holding a cup of coffee, the same tired, searching eyes that had met hers across a rain-streaked window. Amara's breath caught. The phone slipped from her grip and clattered onto the counter. Customers turned. Coffee spilled. She didn't move. The anchor continued. In each town, Mr. Rourke observes how people treat those they believe have nothing. He calls it a test of humanity. In his own words, "You can't measure compassion in numbers, only in moments." Her mind spun. The man she'd defended, the stranger mocked by others, that was Elias Rourke, one of the richest men in the country. The man whose face now filled every screen hailed as a visionary. She felt her knees weaken. It wasn't just disbelief. It was the collision of two worlds. The one she served coffee in, and the one that owned everything above it. Mr. Clark, her manager, stood frozen beside her. His jaw dropped as the camera zoomed in on Rourke's weathered coat. Still wet, still ordinary. "That can't be him," he muttered. "He was here." Amara said nothing. The truth was louder than anything she could have spoken. The anchor went on. Rourke Holdings has pledged millions to improve small-town businesses and workers' conditions, beginning with locations that showed unexpected kindness. The words struck like thunder. Locations that showed kindness. Amara turned toward the chair by the window, the one she'd given up, the one that had started it all. Light poured through the glass now, hitting the seat just right, turning it golden. She remembered his eyes, how they had softened when she offered that chair. The silence between them had meant more than any conversation could. The diner felt different now, smaller, almost sacred. People whispered. The same ones who had mocked him stared at the empty chair with regret painted across their faces. Amara picked up her phone again. The video replayed automatically. Rourke, standing before reporters, spoke softly. "We build towers to measure success, but sometimes the highest act of grace happens in the smallest room." By the window, with a cup of coffee, her eyes filled. It was him, and it was her story, too. For the first time in days, she smiled, not out of pride, but peace. The world had finally seen the man she once served. And in doing so, it had seen her too. The rumble of engines broke the morning calm. Not thunder this time, but power arriving dressed in black. It was just past 9 when the first SUV rolled to a stop outside the diner. Then another. Then 2 more. The cars lined the curb in perfect formation, glossy as mirrors, their tinted windows reflecting the old neon sign, "Open 24 hours." Inside, the regulars paused mid-bite. Forks hung in the air. Even the jukebox seemed to fall silent. Amara stood behind the counter, refilling sugar jars, unaware that the world beyond the glass had just shifted toward her. The door opened, and a rush of crisp air swept through. 3 men in tailored suits entered, each wearing the kind of composure that comes from never being told no. Their shoes shone, their voices carried. One spoke first. "We're looking for Miss Amara Wells." Amara blinked, startled. "That's me," she said quietly, unsure. The man nodded. "Mr. Elias Rourke would like a word." Gasps moved through the diner like wind through leaves. Someone whispered his name. Another dropped a spoon. Even the manager, Mr. Clark, straightened his tie with trembling hands. Moments later, a 4th figure stepped in. Older, slower, but commanding without effort. Elias Rourke. Gone were the soaked coat and muddy shoes, replaced by a dry version of the same outfit, a silent tribute to the night she had met him. His presence filled the room without sound. He removed his hat and nodded politely to the onlookers. "Miss Wells," he said, his voice calm but weighted, "I believe I owe you an apology." Amara stood frozen. Her mind raced back to the rain, the coffee, the note. "Sir, I didn't know who you were," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "That's precisely why I came." He walked closer, resting his hand on the counter, the same counter where she'd once been scolded for her kindness. "You see, I spend my life surrounded by people who pretend to see me, but that night you actually did." The manager stepped forward awkwardly. "Mr. Rourke, I had no idea." Rourke lifted a hand gently. "You didn't need to. She did enough for all of you." The words hung heavy. The suits behind him said nothing. This wasn't a scolding, it was something deeper, quieter. He turned back to Amara. "I run a foundation for community outreach," he said. "We build programs to restore dignity to the working class. People like you who still believe decency matters. I'd like you to join us. Lead one of our new initiatives." The diner seemed to stop breathing. Amara's heart pounded. She looked around, at her co-workers, at the tired faces she'd served for years. Her hands trembled, not from shock but from disbelief that life could turn so sharply. "I appreciate it, sir," she said finally, "but I don't need money or titles. What I'd like is something simpler." Rourke tilted his head. "And what's that?" "Fairness," she said. "Better pay for the staff here. Safer hours. Respect that doesn't depend on who's watching. The silence that followed was pure and clean, like the first moment after a storm. Rourke nodded slowly, his eyes softening. Then that's where we'll start. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, reflecting off the SUVs like a promise. The world had witnessed power meeting humility, and bowing to it. Rourke extended his hand. Thank you, Miss Wells, for reminding me what leadership is supposed to look like. Amara shook it gently. And thank you, sir, she replied, for reminding me it still exists. As he left, the engine started again, fading into the distance. The diner door closed softly behind him, but something invisible had changed. Not just for Amara, but for everyone watching. For the first time, power had come not to command, but to listen. Some stories end not with applause, but with quiet proof that kindness leaves footprints even time can't wash away. Weeks had passed since the black SUVs disappeared down the road. The old diner, once dim and weary, now gleamed with fresh paint and a new sign that read, The Haven. The air smelled of fresh coffee and hope. For the first time in years, the tables were full. Not just of customers, but of laughter that came from something real. Amara stood behind the counter, tying her new apron. The logo stitched on the front bore the words Rourke Foundation Community Program. Her pay was better now. Her hours were fair, and more than anything, she felt seen. But what drew every visitor's eye wasn't the coffee or the colors. It was the chair by the window, the same one she had given up weeks ago. It had been cleaned, polished, and set apart like a symbol. A small bronze plaque was fixed to its back, gleaming in the morning light, to the seat that changed a life, and reminded another what humanity costs. Amara read it often, not out of pride, but disbelief. The same chair that had once held a shivering stranger now stood as a reminder that small gestures could ripple far beyond their moment. The morning crowd bustled in, truckers, families, young couples. The rhythm of life returned, yet part of her still expected something impossible, to look up and find that old man again, sitting quietly with his trembling hands around a cup. As if answering that thought, the diner door chimed. The sound was gentle, familiar. Elias Rourke stepped inside. No cameras, no entourage this time. Just him, dressed plainly, a smile resting softly beneath his tired eyes. Good morning. Miss Wells, he said. Good morning. Mr. Rourke, she replied, surprised yet calm. As though this meeting had been waiting for them both. He looked around, studying the bright space that had replaced the gloom. You've done well, he said. Better than I ever could, she smiled. You gave us a chance. That's what people need most, a fair one. He chuckled lightly. I gave resources. You gave meaning. The two stood in silence for a moment, both glancing toward the chair. The morning sun caught its surface, scattering gold across the floor. Rourke walked over and placed his hand gently on the backrest. This chair taught me something, he said. All the money in the world can build things, but only compassion gives them life. Amara poured him a cup of coffee. Steady hands now, no tremor, no fear. I'm glad it found its way back home, she said softly. He nodded. No, he replied, his voice calm but sure. It's us who finally came home. Outside, the clouds that once hid the sun had cleared. The light streamed through the window, falling across the chair, the counter, and Amara's face as she smiled and handed him the cup. No thunder, no rain, just peace. The chair stood quietly by the window, waiting for whoever needed it next. Proof that dignity once given never disappears. It multiplies.